Good evening and welcome. Wherever you are listening from tonight, whether the world outside your window is loud or quiet, busy or still, let this be a small pause, a gentle turning away from the day. Allow your shoulders to soften. Let your jaw unclench. And if it helps, take a slow breath in through the nose and let it go, unhurried. Tonight, we begin a calm series of observations through the 9 realms of Norse myth. We won't rush. We won't try to hold every name in the mind at once. We will simply look and listen and notice what each realm feels like when the stories settle into silence. And so we start with Midgard, the middle world, the place of hearth smoke and rain-wet wood, of long roads and low roofs, of waves breaking in the dark beyond the shore, a world that is ordinary and yet never entirely safe, a world held gently between greater powers, as if the cosmos itself has drawn a quiet circle and said, "Here, let life grow. For now, get comfortable. Let the sound of these words be enough. And when you're ready, we'll step closer and begin our observation of Midgard." Midgard is not the highest place, and it is not the deepest. It does not glitter like the bright halls of the gods, nor brood like the older shadows beneath the roots of the world. Midgard is the in-between, the middle, the place where breath fogs in cold air, where hands learn the weight of tools, where fire is coaxed from tinder and kept alive through the long night. If you could drift above it, as lightly as a dream, you might not notice anything extraordinary at first. You would see land and sea, forests thick as sleeping animals, mountain ridges like old bones pressed up through the earth, rivers that turn and turn again, patient as thought, and here and there, human lights, small, warm, brief. A dot of amber behind a window, a thin plume of smoke rising into darker air. Midgard in the oldest telling is not simply a place on a map. It is an enclosure, a protected space. Not perfectly protected, but held as a garden is held, by a fence that must be repaired again and again. It is the realm where vulnerability is normal, where the world can bruise you, and yet you wake the next day and go on, where winter arrives whether you are ready or not, and spring returns without being asked. And because Midgard is the realm of humans, it becomes the realm of habit. The quiet rituals that keep a life together. A bowl placed on a table, a cloak shaken out by the door, a carved beam overhead, darkened by years of smoke, a story told in a low voice, not to impress anyone, but to make the night feel less wide. When people speak of myth, they often rush to the grand things, the thunder, the battles, the monsters. But Midgard begins with smaller sounds. The crackle of a hearth, the sigh of wind through pine needles, the soft knock of rain against a roof, steady as a heartbeat. And somewhere beyond the familiar, beyond the fence line and the last field, there is always the sense of something else watching. Not always close, not always hostile, but present, like the sea at night, quiet from a distance, yet never absent. In this series, we are not here to race through every tale. We are here to observe, so we will approach Midgard the way you might approach a village in fog. Slowly, noticing what appears, then what disappears again. Let's begin with the feeling of the boundary. In Norse thought, the world is shaped by edges, by borders, by lines that separate one kind of existence from another. A shore is an edge between solid ground and moving water. A tree line is an edge between clearing and wilderness. A doorway is an edge between safety and exposure. Midgard is made of these edges. It is the realm of thresholds. You step out into weather. You step back into warmth. You step into a boat, and the land falls away behind you. You step onto ice, and the river becomes a road, but only for a while. And in the old stories, these edges are not merely geography. They are spiritual reality. Beyond the edges of Midgard, other powers begin, not as a sudden wall, but as a gradual change in the air. The way a forest grows darker without announcing it. The way the sea deepens from green to black. In this middle world, humans live with that gradual shift. They live with the knowledge that the land they know is surrounded by land they do not. They live with the memory that the world was not built for comfort. Comfort is something you build yourself, plank by plank, season by season. And so Midgard is filled with simple bravery, not the kind sung by poets, though sometimes it is, but the kind that looks like waking up, gathering wood, repairing a roof, sharing food when there is not much, keeping a child warm when the wind sounds angry outside. In the mythic imagination, these ordinary acts are not separate from the cosmos. They are part of the cosmos. They are the human response to a world that is vast and old and sometimes indifferent. If you listen closely, you can hear how Midgard teaches a certain kind of wisdom, a quiet realism, the knowledge that most things cannot be controlled, only met, that storms will come, that darkness will come, that loss will come, and still there is the hearth, still there is the table, still there is the story. Now, as we stand at the edge of Midgard in our imagination, it may help to picture it not as one single landscape, but as many. Some parts are coastal, where waves gnaw at stone and salt lives in the air, where boats are pulled up onto shingle beaches and ropes creak in the wind, where the horizon feels like a long, dark promise. Some parts are inland, where the forests are so deep they seem to drink sound, where the ground is soft with moss and your footsteps vanish behind you, where a deer can appear and disappear as if it was never there. Some parts are high and exposed, where the sky sits close and clouds scrape the peaks, where snow can fall in sudden silence and the world becomes simple, white ground, grey air, your own breath. And some parts are small and sheltered, Valleys with fields, narrow rivers, a cluster of homes, a fence, a path worn smooth by years of feet. The places where the human world feels most like itself. Busy, bounded, familiar. These are the textures of Midgard. If you were a traveler moving through it at night, you might notice how different kinds of darkness live here. There is the darkness of open land, where you can see stars, and your mind opens with them. There is the darkness of forest, where you can't see far, and you feel your own body more clearly. There is the darkness of cloud, where even the moon is covered, and the world becomes a quieter room. In the Old North, darkness was not merely absence. It was a presence, a season, a landscape, a living thing. And yet, in Midgard, humans learn to live with it. They learn to carry light, not only literal light, though that matters, but the light of routine, the light of memory, the light of companionship. In myth, Midgard is sometimes described as a place made secure by divine effort, shielded, protected, enclosed. But it is also described as a place that must constantly be defended, because the forces beyond it are not sleeping. They are simply elsewhere. At the edges of Midgard, the world can feel thin. Not thin like paper, thin like ice over dark water, thin like a quiet moment when you realize you are not alone in your thoughts. These thin places are where the old stories like to gather. A traveler on a road far from home meets a stranger who knows too much. A fisherman at sea sees something long and coiled beneath the water. A shepherd in the hills hears a voice in the wind that sounds almost like speech. Midgard is full of these almost moments, and what makes them powerful is not how loudly they are told, but how softly. The Norse imagination does not always shout its mysteries. Often it places them at the edge of vision, at the edge of hearing, so that you feel them more than you can explain them. And that is appropriate, because Midgard is the realm of feeling. The gods have great knowledge. The giants have great age. But humans have something else. They have immediacy. They live inside time the way a fish lives inside water. Every hour matters. Every season matters. Every meal matters. Every goodbye matters. In Midgard, time is not infinite, so it becomes precious without needing to be dramatic. A cup of warm drink on a cold evening becomes a small miracle. A safe return from a journey becomes a kind of blessing. A lullaby becomes a spell. And perhaps that is why Midgard is called the middle world, because it is the realm where the cosmic becomes personal, where vast forces, weather, hunger, love, fear, are experienced one heartbeat at a time. Now, you may already sense something important about the way Midgard is held. It is not held by stone walls alone. It is held by relationships, by kinship, by promise, by the unspoken agreement that people will help each other survive. In the old world, hospitality mattered because it was survival. You offered a traveler warmth not because you were naive, but because one day you might be the traveler. You shared food not because you had excess, but because you understood how quickly fortune changes. This moral texture, the idea that the world is harsh, and so we must be gentle where we can, runs through Midgard like a river. And in the background of all these human choices, the greater structure of the cosmos remains. Not always visible, but always present. Above, the sky moves. Clouds gather. Stars turn. Below, the earth holds roots and stones and things buried deeper than memory. And through it all, Midgard persists as a living middle. Not the center of the universe because it is most powerful, but because it is where the stories are felt. If you listen, you can almost hear Midgard breathing, the inhale of morning when doors open and smoke rises, the exhale of evening when lamps are lit and voices lower, the slow breath of winter when the world becomes quiet and the mind grows inward, the quick breath of summer when work fills the daylight and sleep comes easier. And so, as we begin our observation, let this be the mood we carry forward. Midgard is not a single myth. It is the stage where myths leave footprints. It is the place where the divine is distant enough to be mysterious and close enough to matter. A place of fences and roads, of fires and storms, of small lights that hold their ground against the surrounding dark. And now, as the middle world settles into your mind like a familiar landscape, we can step closer to its shape. We can begin to trace its coastlines, its forests, its high places and low places, and the boundaries that make it, in the old imagination, both home and threshold. If Midgard is the middle world, then its first and most constant lessons is simple. It has shape. Not the clean shape of a drawing on a page, but the lived shape of distance, of terrain, of weather, and of the long work it takes to cross from one place to another. In the old imagination, Midgard is not endless. It is not infinite. It is held within boundaries, and those boundaries matter. They create the feeling of home and the feeling of beyond. So, for a moment, let us drift slowly over it, not as conquerors or kings, but as quiet observers. Picture the coastline first. The edge where the land gives way, not suddenly but by degrees. Grass becomes stone, stone becomes shingle, shingle becomes sand. And then the sea begins, dark and breathing, drawing forward and back with the patience of something ancient. On some shores, the waves are gentle, almost polite. On others, they are relentless. They grind rock down into smooth pebbles. They pull at driftwood. They leave pale foam like a signature that is erased and rewritten again and again. The sea is a boundary, and yet it is also a road. In Midgard, the water does not merely separate places, it connects them. It offers passage when the forests are too thick, when the mountains are too slow, when the land itself feels unwilling. Boats in this world are not luxuries. They are necessities. They are the thin line between safety and exposure. A hull of wood, a rope, a sail, and then the vastness of the water, which can be kind one day and cruel the next. And when you look out from the shoreline, you can feel something that the old stories love to place at the rim. A sense of scale. The horizon is always farther than you can reach. It is there, and it is not there. It moves away as you move toward it. In that simple fact, the mind begins to understand why myths grow near the sea, why people imagine great things beneath it, why the boundary between the known and the unknown feels so alive where land ends. Now, draw your attention inland. The forests of Midgard are not decorative. They are presence. They are weight. They are living architecture. A cathedral made of trunks and shadow, where the ceiling is woven from branches and wind. In some parts of the world, the trees stand close together, their roots tangled, their needles softening sound. In those places, you can walk for hours and feel as if you are moving through the same scene again and again, as if the forest is gently turning you around without raising its voice. The air is cooler beneath the canopy. The light comes down in narrow beams, and the ground holds the memory of rain, moss, dark soil, damp bark, the quiet perfume of decay that is not unpleasant, only honest. Forests are another kind of boundary. They separate the settled from the wild. They make distance feel longer. They hide what approaches. They are beautiful and they are indifferent. To humans, that can feel like mystery. To the forest, it is simply the way of things. And where the forest opens, you find fields. Not endless golden plains, but the carefully won clearings of Midgard, carved out from what would otherwise take them back. Fields are places where the human world is most visible. A line of fences, a patch of tilled soil, a small barn or shed, a footpath pressed into earth by years of repetition. These are the signatures of life lived close to necessity. And in those open places, the sky feels larger. You can see weather coming from far away. You can watch clouds gather like thoughts. You can see the light change before the wind arrives, and you learn the language of the horizon. In Midgard, people learn to read the sky the way later people learn to read clocks. The sun is not merely a light, it is a schedule, a promise, a warning. When it lowers toward evening, you feel time shift in your body. You feel the need to be inside, the need to have wood gathered, the need to have food ready. Not because you are anxious, but because you are practiced. Now, beyond fields and forests, there are the high places, mountains. They are older than roads. They do not care how you cross them. They stand as if they were placed there to remind the world that not everything yields. Some mountains are sharp and jagged, their ridges cut like broken teeth. Some are rounded, worn by centuries of ice and wind. But all of them share a certain quiet authority. They decide where rivers will run. They decide where snow will linger. They decide where people will travel and where they will not. From a distance, mountains look calm. Up close, they are work. Your breath changes. Your legs feel the incline. The air grows thinner, and the wind grows louder. You begin to understand how small a human body is compared to stone. And yet, even mountains become familiar to those who live near them. A certain peak becomes a landmark. A certain pass becomes a route. A certain cliff becomes a story. This is how Midgard works. The enormous becomes personal through repetition. And then there are the rivers. Rivers are Midgard's veins. They carry meltwater down from mountains. They carry rain across land. They cut valleys and nourish fields. They give fish. They give passage. They give danger. In some seasons, a river is gentle, shallow enough to wade with care. In other seasons, it is swift and cold and swollen, dragging branches and stones along, as if it is in a hurry to reach the sea. A river is a boundary too. It splits one bank from another. It forces decisions. Do you cross here? Do you wait? Do you build a bridge? Do you take the long way around? And when winter comes, the river changes again. It becomes ice. It becomes a road. But it is a road you must not trust too quickly. Midgard is full of this. Things that transform. Things that look safe until they are not. Not out of malice, out of nature. And so people in Midgard learn a kind of careful courage. They learn when to move and when to stay. They learn when to risk the crossing and when to respect the water. Now, if you take all of this together, the coastline, the forests, the fields, the mountains, the rivers, you begin to see that Midgard's shape is not only geography, it is experience. A person does not know Midgard by seeing it once from above. A person knows it by walking it, by carrying things through it, by enduring its seasons, by being changed by it. Because Midgard is shaped by time. Spring in Midgard feels like the world exhaling. The snow loosens its grip. Water runs everywhere, bright and cold. The ground turns soft. The air smells of thaw and damp wood. Birds return with small, sharp voices, as if they are testing the space. Summer feels like long light. The days stretch. Work fills the hours. The land becomes generous, but only if you meet it halfway. Grass grows, crops rise, paths dry out. The world becomes easier to move through. Autumn feels like preparation. The light tilts, the wind changes, the air sharpens. Harvest comes, not as celebration alone, but as urgency. You gather what you can because the world will soon close again. And winter feels like the old truth. The truth that warmth is built. The truth that the night can be long. The truth that the world does not promise comfort. Snow quiets everything. The land becomes hard. The sea becomes darker. The forest becomes a place of deeper stillness. And the human world pulls inward, closer to fire, closer to storm. This cycle is not only weather, it is a rhythm that shapes thought. In Midgard, people learn to accept cycles. They learn that some things return and some do not. They learn that you can prepare, but you cannot control. And this is why Midgard is such a good stage for myth. Because myth lives where the human mind meets forces larger than itself. A storm is larger than a person. A winter is larger than a person. The sea is larger than a person. But a person still has to live, still has to love, still has to build, still has to bury. So Midgard becomes a place where the ordinary is always edged with the cosmic. Now, let us drift lower, closer to human settlements. Villages in Midgard are often small in the imagination, not grand cities of marble, but clusters of wooden homes, halls built for gatherings, places where people share warmth and protection. A longhouse is more than architecture. It is an idea. It is the human answer to weather. A roof that can hold back rain. Walls that can hold in heat. A fire pit that becomes a heart. Inside you have the sounds that make Midgard feel like Midgard. A pot simmering. A spoon against wood. Footsteps on packed earth. A low voice telling a tale that has been told before. Not because people cannot think of something new, but because familiar stories are a kind of shelter. In a world where the outside is uncertain, repetition is comforting. And beyond the village, the roads. Roads in Midgard are not always roads as we imagine them now. Sometimes they are paths. Sometimes they are tracks pressed by hooves and wheels. Sometimes they are simply the remembered route between one place and another. But they matter. Because roads are the lines that stitch the middle world together. They are the places where travelers appear, where news arrives, where danger can come from a distance. The road is a promise that you are not alone in the world. It is also a reminder that others can reach you. So people watch the road. They listen for it. They keep an ear for footsteps, for voices, for the faint creak of a cart. In the old stories, a stranger at the door is never just a stranger. It could be a wanderer. It could be a beggar. It could be a god in disguise. It could be trouble. Midgard has this quality, this thinness at the edges of the familiar, where the ordinary can turn mythic without warning. And now we come to a deeper aspect of Midgard's shape, the idea of enclosure. In the Norse imagination, Midgard is set apart. It is protected in some way from what lies beyond. Not because humans are the strongest, but because the world needs a middle space for human life to exist at all. Think of it as a circle drawn in ash. Inside the circle, the fire can be kept. Outside the circle, the darkness is larger. The boundary is not perfect, but it matters. And this is where Midgard begins to feel like a living thing, because it is not only held by landscape, it is held by effort, by gods who protect it at times, by humans who maintain it always, by the countless small actions that keep a fragile place functioning. A fence repaired, a net mended, a roof patched, a door barred at night, a watch kept when the wind sounds wrong. This is how Midgard holds its shape. And when you see it this way, you understand why the myths of Midgard so often return to the idea of threat at the edge. Because a boundary only matters if something presses against it. A fence only matters if there are wolves. A wall only matters if there are enemies. A shoreline only matters if the sea can take you. So Midgard is always aware of its rim, always aware of the places where the world could open into something larger and stranger. And this awareness does not make Midgard bleak. It makes it vivid. It makes the warmth of the hearth feel real. It makes the return home feel meaningful. It makes the simple act of being alive feel like something that is earned again and again. Now, let your mind rest in this shape for a moment. Coastline, forests, fields, mountains, rivers, villages and roads, sky and weather, a world of edges, a world of thresholds, a world held in the middle. And as you settle into the feel of Midgard's geography, its rhythm, its boundaries, we can begin to notice what waits at the rim, not as a sudden terror, not as a sharp interruption, but as a quiet truth that has always been there. A presence circling the world like a thought you cannot quite forget. And that presence is where our next observation will drift. There are some things in myth you do not look at directly, not because they are frightening, but because they are too large to fit inside a single glance. You feel them first, like weather before it arrives, like the weight of a mountain you haven't reached yet, like a distant drum you cannot place, but you know is real. Yggdrasil is like that. The world tree, the great ash that stands at the center of Norse imagination, holding realms the way a living spine holds the body of a creature too vast to name. But tonight, we will not rush to its roots. We will not climb it. And we will not name every branch. We will simply observe it from Midgard, the way a person might sense a forest beyond a hill. Not as a diagram, not as a lesson, as a presence, because in Midgard, even the greatest structures of the cosmos are rarely seen in full. They are felt in pieces, in symbols, in whispers, in the strange way the world sometimes seems connected, as if every small thing is tied to something larger and older and quietly alive. So imagine yourself in Midgard on an ordinary evening. The sky is darkening, the wind is light, smoke rises from a few distant chimneys. A dog barks once, then stops, as if it remembered it has nothing important to say. You look up and you see stars. Not all at once, but one, then two, then a scattered field of them, appearing as the light fades. And in that moment, you might feel the first hint of the world tree, not as a literal trunk in the sky, but as the sense that the heavens are not empty. They are structured. They are held. There is a kind of order, a kind of architecture that is not built by human hands. The Norse did not imagine the universe as a simple stack of layers like shelves. They imagined it as something organic, interconnected, rooted, branching. And Yggdrasil is the image that carries that feeling. A tree is a strange thing when you think about it slowly. It grows upward into the air, which is invisible. It grows downward into the soil, which hides everything. It drinks from the dark to make leaves in the light. It stands still, and yet it moves with every season. It looks simple, and yet it is full of hidden pathways. In a world where people lived close to trees, close enough to know which ones were safe, which ones were sacred, which ones would hold up a roof beam, and which ones would crack in winter, it makes sense that the cosmos itself would be imagined as a tree, because a tree is the perfect bridge. It connects above and below. It connects life and decay. It connects the present to the past through rings you cannot see unless you cut it open.
And so, from Midgard, Yggdrasil is the idea that you are never truly separate.
Not from the gods, not from the giants, not from the dead, not from fate. Even when you live a simple life, mending nets, feeding animals, walking a road, gathering wood, your life is held inside a larger structure, something rooted deeper than your memories, something branching farther than your imagination. Now, some people picture Yggdrasil as a colossal tree you could actually see if you stood in the right place. Others picture it as a spiritual truth, a map drawn in myth. Tonight, we don't need to decide.
We can let it remain what it was meant to be.
A way of feeling the cosmos. A way of remembering that the world has layers and connections and hidden currents. From Midgard, you might first notice Yggdrasil in the way stories keep returning to three directions: upward, downward, outward.
Upward, toward the bright places where gods are said to dwell, where order is built, where halls are lit, where power gathers.
Downward, toward the deep places where roots grip stone, where cold water collects, where the dead drift in silence and memory thins. And outward, toward the edges where the familiar phrase, where wilderness begins, where old forces press close to the fence. A tree holds all three. Branches rise, roots descend, limbs reach outward, and Midgard sits among it, not at the top, not at the bottom, but in the middle, where human life can exist. Now imagine a traveller in Midgard walking a road at night. The moon is thin. The clouds slide past it. The traveller's cloak shifts in the wind. The world is quiet, but not empty. And in that quiet, the traveller may feel that the path beneath their feet is not only a path through land, it is a path through something larger. Because roads in myth are never only physical, they are symbolic. A road is the line between one place and another, yes, but it is also the line between one state of being and another, between youth and age, between safety and danger, between ignorance and knowledge. And so the world tree in the background becomes the thing that makes all roads feel connected. As if every road in Midgard is a small echo of a greater path that runs through all realms. You see this feeling again in the way Norse stories treat certain places as thresholds. A grove that feels different, a spring that seems older than the land around it, a hill where the wind sounds like a voice, a crossroads where decisions feel heavier than they should. These places don't need to be magical in the modern sense. They only need to feel thin. And the world tree is the reason thin places exist, because it suggests that reality is layered and that the layers touch. Now, in the mythic imagination, Yggdrasil is not a gentle, safe symbol. It is not a cute tree with perfect leaves. It is alive in the way the world is alive, meaning it contains struggle. It contains decay. It contains tension. A tree, after all, is not immortal. It lives under constant pressure. Wind bends it. Snow weighs it down. Insects burrow into it. Fungi feed on it. And still it stands. Still it grows. Still it holds. This is a very Norse kind of image. The cosmos does not stand because it is untouched. It stands because it endures. And so, from Midgard, we sense Yggdrasil not as perfection, but as persistence, a living system that is always threatened, always strained, always holding together anyway. In the old tales, creatures move along Yggdrasil. Some carry messages, some carry malice, some carry simple appetite. There is a sense that the world tree is not only structure, it is traffic, movement between realms, a living highway for forces the human mind can barely name, but we don't need to list them tonight. Instead, just picture the idea that somewhere beyond Midgard's familiar sky, beyond its forests and seas, something vast is happening continuously. not in the way of a dramatic event, in the way of a heartbeat, in the way of sap rising, in the way of roots drinking. The world is maintained by motion you do not see. Now, let's come closer to a single image, a tree near a well. In many mythic traditions, wells matter, springs matter, water sources matter, because water is memory, water is depth, water is life, but it is also darkness, because you cannot see far into it. In Norse myth, the world tree stands near wells, and the wells are not decorative. They are the places where knowledge gathers, where fate gathers, where something older than the gods may be waiting. From Midgard, you know this instinctively. A well in the ground is a kind of portal. You drop something into it, and it disappears. You lower a bucket into it, and you draw up life from darkness. You look into it, and you see your own face mixed with shadow. The world tree, drinking from wells, is the idea that even the cosmos must be nourished by what lies beneath. Even the greatest structure needs roots in darkness. And that is comforting in a strange way, because it means Midgard's ordinary realities, soil, water, decay, growth, are not separate from the divine. They are part of it. The gods do not float in abstract light. They stand on the same underlying truth as everything else. Now, if you live in Midgard, you may not think about cosmic trees every day. Most days you think about weather, food, family, work, sleep. But the world tree is what turns these daily concerns into part of a larger pattern. It is what lets a person feel that their small life is connected to the large story of everything. And that connection is one of the quiet comforts of myth. Not comfort in the sense of nothing bad will happen, but comfort in the sense of your life is not meaningless. Your struggles are not random. Your joys are not isolated. You are part of a living structure. Now, there is another way the world tree can be observed from Midgard. Through the idea of verticality. In Midgard, you live on the surface. You walk on ground. You build above it. You bury beneath it. So naturally, you begin to think in terms of above and below. Above is sky, light, weather, birds, gods. Below is soil, roots, stone, water, the dead. And Midgard is the thin layer between. A skin stretched between vastness and depth. The world tree turns that simple vertical experience into a cosmic map. It tells you above and below are not separate domains. They are connected. The roots go down. The branches go up. And what
This is why, in many Norse stories, actions have consequences that travel farther than expected. A small betrayal can ripple through families and generations. A single oath can bind kings. A single insult can spark wars. The world is connected, and the tree is the symbol of that connection. Now, let us allow the image to soften again, because we are not here for intensity. We are here for slow observation. Picture Midgard at night. A few lights in a village. The forest line beyond. The sea farther still. The sky above, carrying stars like scattered embers. And behind it all, the sense of the tree. Not as something you can point to, but as something you can feel in the way the world seems held. As if there are supports you cannot see. As if there are pathways hidden beneath your feet. As if there are branches above you that you will never climb, but you still live beneath their shadow. Now think about how a tree sounds. Not loud, not obvious, but present. Leaves shifting, branches creaking. A low conversation with the wind. In the mythic imagination, Yggdrasil has that sound. A constant, subtle movement. The kind of movement that makes you feel time passing, even when nothing happens. And time in Norse myth is not a gentle river, it is a force. It wears things down. It brings winter. It brings age. It brings endings. The world tree stands inside time, enduring. It is not outside time. It is not immune. It is part of the same great story that includes decay and renewal. And that means Yggdrasil is not a symbol of escape. It is a symbol of participation. Everything participates in the same cycle. The gods, the giants, humans, the dead, even the world itself. And perhaps the most distinctly Norse aspect of the world tree is this. It is fated to tremble, not forever stable, not eternally safe. There is an awareness, deep in the myths, that the cosmos has an end, that the structure will one day strain past its limits, that the branches will shake, that the roots will grow. And yet, the tree still stands now. The world still turns now. Life still happens now. So the presence of the world tree does not make the stories anxious. It makes them meaningful. Because if even the cosmos must end one day, then every warm meal matters. Every friendship matters. Every act of courage matters. Even sleep matters. Because sleep is the way the body returns to itself. Now from Midgard, you don't need to stare at the future. You only need to feel the present more clearly. And the world tree helps with that.
because it makes the present feel connected. It makes your small moment in the middle world feel like part of the vast.
Now, let's bring our attention gently back down. Back to Midgard.
Back to the familiar. Because the world tree can be overwhelming if you try to hold all of it at once. So instead, we will keep it as background, a distant shape, a quiet support, a reminder that Midgard is not isolated. Midgard is one realm among many, and those other realms are not merely elsewhere. They are connected to Midgard by roots and branches and hidden paths. In the chapters ahead, we will begin to sense those neighboring pressures more clearly. We will notice what lies beyond the fence, what moves at the rim, what circles the shores, what tests the boundaries. But for now, let the world tree remain what it is from this vantage point. A presence you can feel, even when you do not name it. A structure that holds the cosmos, even as it endures strain. A living symbol that whispers gently that everything is connected, and that Midgard, your middle world of hearths and roads and weather, is not small in meaning, only small in scale.
And now, as the sky over Midgard deepens into night,
as the last light fades from the horizon, we can begin to turn our attention to the rim of the world, to the boundary that is not a wall, but a curve,
to the vast, dark sea,
and to the quiet idea that something there is always present, always circling, always waiting. And that is where our next observation will begin. And so we return quietly to where we began, to Midgard,
to the middle world of shorelines and forests, of roads and hearths, of weather moving across open fields like slow breath, a place held between heights and depths, a place shaped not by perfection, but by endurance. Tonight we looked at Midgard as it is felt rather than measured. We traced its boundaries, the way the land gives way to sea, the way the forest gathers shadow, the way rivers divide and connect. And we sensed, in the background, the presence of something larger, the great tree that ties the worlds together, not as a ladder, but as a living structure of roots and branches and quiet strain. If you are listening as you drift towards sleep, let Midgard become simple again. A warm room, a steady roof, a small fire. The sound of wind outside, harmless now. The long dark held at bay by light you have made for yourself. In the middle world, that is always the work. Not grand, not heroic, just steady, just human.
And if your mind wanders, let it wander gently. Let it move like a slow walk along a familiar path. A coastline at dusk, a tree line in soft moonlight, a river whispering under ice. Nothing urgent, nothing to solve, only the feeling that the world is held, and that you too can be held within it. In our next observation, we will will step beyond Midgard's familiar ground and turn our gaze toward another realm, one farther from the hearth and closer to the old wild edges of the cosmos. But for now, Midgard is enough. For now, you are safe in the middle. Good night.